So it's like if a lender takes foreclosure action, the lender must sue all subsequent lender to successfully foreclosure all equitable interest. Therefore, subsequent lenders are entitled to the right to be notified prior to the commencement of any legal proceedings by any lender with the registered interest on title in order to protect their respective financial interest. In the foreclosure, it means like suppose if I have like 2-3 properties, so my first one is gonna be the priority, right?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the number of properties you have. So priority of the mortgage means that one person can have multiple mortgages on one property, right? We're not dealing with any other properties. Okay, so we're just dealing with that particular property. So if let's say a person has two properties, but one is going into foreclosure, that has no implication whatsoever on the second property they have. It's that a property is off limits. They can only go after this particular property that they have, right? That they're foreclosing on. So that's so other properties do not come into play. Other assets the person owns do not come into play. So what does come into play would be, so let's say a person has a person owns a property. The property is worth, let's say, 400,000, and somebody has a mortgage on it, first mortgage for 200,000, and then they pulled out some money from it, so they have second mortgage for 100,000, right? So they owe $300,000 in total mortgages. So the first mortgage that was registered on the property would the one with 200. It's not based on the amount; it's based on date and time of registration. So the mortgage that gets registered first has the first priority. So in this case, let's say TD Bank had the first mortgage for 200,000, so that's the first priority, and then RBC had second mortgage for 100,000. So TD has the first priority. Let's say the person stops paying TD the mortgage amount, right? So they're not making the mortgage payment. In this case, the mortgage TD can take legal action on them. They can take them into foreclosure, right? So they can foreclose on the property. So in this case, TD would have to notify RBC that they're starting a foreclosure action. I was having this conversation with my husband just the other day. So in this case, I don't know the client names or stuff, just the overall like theoretical conversation was where he was saying they have clients, they're in trouble, and he always talks to me about these things because we have properties, like we have rental properties and so forth. And one of the things that he's always very concerned about is how much debt we are taking on, right? Just kind of managing them just from investor perspective, because he's seen a lot of people go into problems because that's the area that he works in. That's his job, is to like he has to deal with all these people who have overextended themselves and now they're in trouble. And not he's on the commercial side. Okay. So he was just giving an example of where somebody had a big mortgage, but they also had other mortgages on the property, but they are in the first position and they're in the first priority position. So he was saying how unfortunately they may have to foreclose on the property, and he was saying how he's trying to help the person to avoid that, right? So he can, like, if they can work with him and avoid the foreclosure, because he believes that they may be able to pull through, right? So they may be able to make things work and pull through. But the problem is, if they're not making the mortgage payments on this property to them who are in the first priority, that means they're likely not making their mortgage payments to other mortgages, right? So in this case, they are in the first priority. So what happens is, so he was like, we may have to foreclose, even though I don't want to, or we don't want to, because there are other mortgages registered and other lenders can foreclose on the property, in which case they don't have any control, right? So usually, so if let's say TD was going to foreclose on the property, TD would notify RBC that they're taking this foreclosure action on the property, but TD's in control, right? TD decides what happens. And this was a similar situation with my husband. He was like, the reason we would have to do this is because if we don't do it, somebody else will, and then we have no control. right? So if, let's say, another lender was in, let's say, the situation with my husband, let's say in this case, another lender was going to take foreclosure action, then they would notify TD, right? Let's say RBC was going to know to take the action, they would notify TD that we are starting the foreclosure process. But TD doesn't control the process, even though they're in the first priority, right? They will get paid first, but they don't control the process. So whatever like extra cost that RBC will add on, TD has no control over that, right? So this is why usually the first priority bank will take the foreclosure action so that they control the process, but their responsibility would be to notify everybody else that they're going to start the action.